All right, so it is recording, and if there's any other sounds like your computer might make,
Mm-hmm.
like notifications, you might want to silence those.
They should be, I should be good for that.
Okay.
Do not disturb, yep. But thank you. I never mind reminders. And I will take this priceless little shot just so you can see. Hey, Max.
That's
He's
awesome.
like 44 inches tip to tail.
Oh my gosh. Big kitty. All right,
Owns the
so I'll
house.
do a little quick intro and thank you for being here, and then we'll dive in. Okay.
It sounds great.
Okay. Great. Well, Katie, thank you so much for being here on the Formidable podcast. Thrilled to have you. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Me too. And I'm just crazy about the name Formidable because
Thank
it
you.
just says something that all of us feel at some point in our day or in our life.
Well, I had the chance to read your book, and I have
Oh,
to
thank
say,
you.
I can't think of a more formidable woman, given your experiences, which we'll dive into in a minute here. But why now? Why write a book now?
I probably have to admit that it took a while to write the book once I decided to do it. And I did so I did it collaboratively with a really wonderful woman writer who writes professionally. And it's like having someone help lay out a quilt where I did write a few chapters, all by myself, and they were long and boring, but very comprehensive. you so I love doing it collaboratively, and it did take a while still. But why right now? Is that having retired from NASA as an astronaut, it gives me a little time to think back. And I also get to, because it's like a family, I get to talk to people who still work there, and I'm also out speaking. And so I, you know, end up, talking to people before I speak and after. And not enough has changed. So that's one really big reason that I wrote the book. But the other big reason is that I really loved what I did. I love the people I did it with, even when they're people I feel like maybe they were a little changed after we worked together, and certainly I was many times too. But I think that our work that we do in space, in exploration, is really important. And living in space, having that privilege was magical, and I just love the opportunity to take people there.
Well, you say in the book, being an astronaut changed the way that you look at the world, and what it means to be a citizen of this planet, which I think is just a really powerful phrase. What do you mean by that?
First of all, I knew I was going to go to space. I mean, became an astronaut, going to go to space. You're going to go there as if it's another place you're going to go. And then when we actually climbed in a rocket, launched, and we're in orbit 250 miles above the Earth, I didn't feel like I was gone. I mean, I felt still close to Earth. And it made me realize that home and Earth and the things that we know are just bigger than we thought. Sometimes they just haven't been discovered yet. So that's one thing, is that I really still felt very much at home. But the other thing is that looking back, it's so clear that except for the six, in my case, the six of us that were on the space station, um, every other human that's alive is back on Earth, and you can see them. I tell people, like, if you were alive in 2011, then you were in this picture I took of New York or of Chile or wherever. And just knowing the challenges that we face as a species that are going to take so much interdisciplinary collaboration, if I just felt like if only people knew that they had so many other people out there thinking and working towards the same things, if only they could be connected.
I love that. Well, you one of the things that really struck me reading the book is you point out these sort of subtle differences throughout the book between male and female astronauts. And you're not beating anyone over the head with these, but they are subtle. They come up, like wearing bright colors, having long hair, baking a cake. There's just these really interesting sort of subtle differences. Talk a little bit, like, were you hyper aware of being a woman astronaut? Or was this more of sort of a subtle thing that you noticed over the years, differences for you and your experience?
I would say it's more in looking back and in the big picture, recognizing that sometimes, especially, I mean, something I kind of harp about sometimes is that we talk about soft skills, those skills that one might use at a meeting to get the meeting going in a different direction, or to realize, like, in my case, somebody's got a question and nobody knows it, and I know it's an important question, like whenever this person asks one, and yet they don't always speak up. I'm going to help them, kind of thing. And we think of those as soft skills, and I think of them as pivotal skills, sometimes stereotypically female, but often I think coming from voices that are not always heard without them working at it. And that doesn't mean just women, it's underrepresented minorities, it's people who are different in a new situation. It's the stay-at-home dads, who are gathered at the bus stop with the female spouses. Um, anyway, so I think that often it's underrepresented voices that think about how can everybody be heard, and that's not a soft kind of skill. But when I
Oh,
was
definitely.
there, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, oh, definitely. I was hoping you can talk a little bit about, you know, did you feel different at any point, or feel like you were treated differently because of your gender while you were with NASA?
I'll say yes, in that it's not that I've felt angry all the time. And the, the reason I'm sort of searching for my words here is that at the time I'm just at work and I know what my job is and I know what I'm trying to do, and I just want to find a way to do it. And so when somebody says to me, you know, I've been doing some listening and I've realized that, the reason you're not assigned to the space station yet is that people are worried that you have a commuting relationship and your family lives somewhere else and you might not be okay being without them. And I'm thinking, okay, so I've commuted for 15 years at this point at my own expense, never missed a meeting, and people are worried that I won't be able to be without my family. And but I don't really have time to process that. And the same person who is a friend said, I think a good solution is, let's make sure you get assigned as your extra job in the space station world, and they're going to work with you, and they're going to know right away like how capable you are. And there's a choice there. You can either say, what is going on here? This is not fair. We should talk about this. Does the chief of the office know this is happening? But I mean, I'm not even really thinking about that. I'm like, okay, I'd love to. What kind of job in the in the space station program? Because I just want to get to the thing I'm trying to do that I think I'm really there to do. So very purpose driven. And I don't always kind of think about why or what, except in how do I need to be differently strategic in order to play the role that I know I could play here. Does that make
It
sense?
strikes me, yeah, it strikes me, Katie, as you were talking, that that's just a very problem solving perspective.
I
That
guess so.
and I was thinking about that as reading the book, that there's this theme sort of starts to come up, that you're faced with challenges, you're faced with problems, whether they're related to your gender or just related to the difficult nature of your job, and that you always sort of approach them with this, it's a sort of a similar approach, whether you're doing chemistry or you're doing a spacewalk, or you're trying to navigate the challenges of being a mom and an astronaut at the same time. You've got this really problem solving mentality to it. Can you talk a little bit about how that developed throughout your career and your approach, just professionally?
Well, I'd say as you described that, I thought, well, I think I was in the right job. In that when you're going to be without resources and you only have who you have together and what you have where you are, you have to be a problem solver. And I think that was a good fit for me job wise. Um, I like the fact that the title of my book has making change in the title. And when I think about making change, I think it's a personal thing for everyone, how they do that, what they're good at. And it's going to be dependent on the situation too. Is this the wise course? Is this the constructive course in this situation? And I kind of put the scales like either something happens that's like not fair, not right. Like they eliminate the small spacesuit size, the spacesuit that fits more than a third of the women. And I could go, hey, you knew how big I was when you picked me, and you just eliminated this suit that actually fits me. I mean, do the taxpayers know this, right? You can do it, or, you don't have to throw the taxpayer thing in there, but I could be, and they go, you're right. That's absolutely correct. Why don't you sit right there? And as soon as we have a spacesuit that's going to fit you, we will bring it and you will go to space. And I'd still be sitting there, right? And it's not because they don't care. It's that it's a difficult problem to solve in a hurry. And I am, the punchline here is that they are actually working on spacesuits that fit everyone. Um, I think that's an active situation that they're working hard at and probably always need a little nudging about. But the other end of that spectrum is how can I reach these people that are on the team in a way that they can hear and have them become part of the solution. So that's really more my way. And I do well with encouragement and with collaboration. And certainly there were both men and women that saw this change happening where by eliminating those spacesuits that fit many of the women, what it meant at that what it meant was that you could be on the space shuttle and go up and help fix something, but you can't stay on the space station. You can't live there and work there. And that's really what I wanted to do as a scientist. And I just thought people are supposed to live up here. So, in wanting to do that, you had to be spacesuit qualified. And that meant qualifying in a suit that was much larger than you were. And I was determined to do that. And I got a lot of help. I was offered help and I recruited help to end up to do something I'm very proud of, which is to eventually qualify in that medium spacesuit. And it's a simple, actually, physics thing. At the time, there were 3 people going up in each little capsule, our Russian Soyuz. And that means when you get there, basically, there's going to be 3 spacewalkers, 2 that are going to go outside, and 1 is the backup or whose turn is next time. But you need the 3, 2 prime plus a backup. And if you can't do that, you can't go. And it wasn't until the larger capsules came along with our partnerships with commercial partners like SpaceX and with Boeing that have at least 4 seats. Now we can have 2 spacewalkers, a backup, and a person who couldn't qualify, perhaps because the suit that fit them was eliminated. And if I had gone that path or had not been able to qualify in the medium suit, I would have waited, I would say, at least 11 years to go and live on the space station.
Wow.
So
Which
we
could have
lost
potentially
11
eliminated.
years of people.
Wow.
Say that
And
again, Emily.
no, so that would have
So it
waiting
had
11
really big,
years.
yeah.
Yeah. Waiting 11 years would have potentially been too long, right?
Exactly. I might have actually physically not been able to go, develop something medically, all those kinds of things. But what it really says is that, this is spacewalking is a job. It's not that everybody has to do it, but it's one of the jobs that we do. And if your career is to be an astronaut, to not be able to go on a certain series of missions, you're not going to end up being the chief of the office. Not that that was my particular ambition, right? You're not going to have experiences that are going to you can then, say to the program. I'm not saying that very well. I don't know if we need to go there. What I was going to say was that, let me just think about this for a minute. The statement that I remember when the spacesuit was eliminated, which wasn't done casually. They're like, it's more expensive. We don't have the room or the money to support the small, the medium, the large, and the extra large. So we're going to get rid of basically the small. And I remember the chief of the office looked up and said, "We've looked at the manifest and we're going to be okay because we realize that we have all of the spacewalkers that we need." And it's a very clear way of saying, the bunch of you that fit in that suit that don't get to go now, we are not going to miss you. We're not going to miss your skills, your experience, what you bring to a situation when the situation is dire, the training that we've given you. I mean, there's always hard decisions to make, right? And they're making the best decision they could at the time. But I think it's a good thing to be looking at because we don't want to do that again. And you don't want to do it in your business or on your team to have not thought far enough ahead that you realize that it's not just about who didn't go on the field trip today. It's about, like, let's say you're going to go on a company trip and, only a couple people get to go, or everybody but so and so. When people are talking about, this is what we all know and now what we all think we can do, you've got part of the team that doesn't know that. That's maybe not the best example, but anyways,
No,
what I am
it,
very, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's a great example, and sort of a lesson to non NASA folks about inclusion and how important it is to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that everybody in your organization has the same opportunities. Um, and in this case, you had to prove yourself with equipment that just frankly didn't fit you, which adds a degree of difficulty that a lot of your colleagues didn't have, and you then had to overcome.
And that's actually a more common sort of occurrence than, it's you might think. In construction, anything that involves wearing some equipment for your job, gloves, the height of operating tables before they got to be adjustable, the height of podiums. Hello. When I was training on the robotic arm, they had like two levels of steps that you could put in the simulator, because in the simulator we're standing, right? And in space it's actually easy, and I'm not short in space, right? It doesn't matter that I'm short, but I would usually not even, I didn't get the big box, I'd get a medium-sized box, and I don't like to get up to a podium where I know that people can't really see me. It's, anyways, that's a minor thing, but certainly in sports, all these things, in safety and automobile safety, I think they're trying to change these standards. But I don't know about you, but I put a seatbelt on in my car and it slices right into my neck, right? My husband never understands why I want to have that little furry thing. I'm like, because it like cuts me right there, because it's designed for a bigger guy. And
Yeah,
also a lot of
absolutely.
that testing that we do, like the crash dummy testing that is done, was um, was designed for a certain size guy, and actually can lead to greater injuries for women.
Yeah, I was listening to something the other day, Katie, about anesthesia is not frequently tested on women because women's hormones change so frequently, and so they just didn't bother to test it on us because it's harder to have a baseline. Which, of course, when 50% of the population has that problem, it's kind of important to test things like anesthesia on on that population, but they just didn't until recently.
Exactly. And so,
Same
that
problem.
kind of inclusion, looking at it, in whatever your world is, I think you'll find it. And I think the way to create change is going to be the way that makes the most sense to you. I mean, I might actually be at that end of the bench where you just go, this is wrong, you have to fix it. But debating and sort of arguing is not actually my thing. Um, Changing your mind when, you know, when it's being done with you as opposed to you, I think it works better for me. Actually, here up in New England, we had a congressman who's actually since passed away, but this was at a time when they were voting on the space station. And he says to me, he goes, Katie, I have figured this out. You don't talk to me about the space station anymore, but you come to all my fundraisers and you talk to everyone about the space station. And then they talk to me.
I love that.
Me
That's
too.
great. Well, Katie, there was an example that I wanted to dive into a little bit in your book that just really struck me. It was after the really tragic Columbia disaster, and you were part of the team, trying to build a safer shuttle and dealing with these challenges of this. I think you described it as goo. Maybe that's the formal term for it, but
It was pretty much called goo. It was. It's like caulk. It's like rust-colored caulk, like a caulk gun like you'd buy at Home Depot, just a bigger, beefier one.
well, I just love that your formal term for it is goo. But I really appreciated the cake example. And what struck me about this, you're bringing in this sheet cake and frosting to help the team understand the challenges of fixing the crumbly tiles. And what struck me about it was just the importance of diversity on teams and how people with different lived experiences are going to have different points of view about how to solve challenges. Can you talk a little bit just about that particular experience and then maybe how having diverse teams at NASA did help at any other points in problem solving?
Well, that challenge in particular um, was very special to me. I was very proud to be part of that team, and all of us were quite passionate about wanting to make sure that something like Columbia never happened again. And our charge was not to fix the whole problem, but one particular thing. What if something, which is not actually what happened to Columbia, which is what happens if something hurts the bottom of the shuttle. And everyone really wants to be so helpful. It's a passionate thing. And in wanting to be so helpful, combined with a problem that was really hard to sort of put boundaries on it. I mean, think of trying to fix, even in your, let's say it's your driveway and you're going to fix it. There's, deep holes the size of a tire. There's big spread out patches that are bare. I mean, all these damages are different. And when you put this goo on them, it's going to be different in different situations of how to get it to stick. And so the problem itself was, and also making this goo. We've never made this kind of stuff before. It's like other stuff that we've done. Because actually, putting stuff that protects the spacecraft on the bottom and having it be kind of like hard pencil eraser kind of consistency, that's not new. Been doing that, for since the age of spacecraft began. And what happens is a little bit of that sort of burns up along the way and actually protects that. The fact that it can kind of burn up, it takes the heat away from the spacecraft. So nothing was new, but it was different to put some different things in it. So I'll just say it was a problem that was really hard to describe. So when you combine intense, passionate hope and wanting to do the right thing with a problem there, it's going to be really hard to even decide what part of the problem we're going to fix. I felt like we had to just come out of our comfort zones and in a way just like have fun with each other so that we could have some of the hard conversations we needed to have. And that tends to be my role in a team, is to bring up some hard things but also find a way to help people communicate better so we can solve them together. And I do think that it can come from being somebody who, as a woman there at NASA, I mean, I really loved the people that I flew with. I love the people that I worked with. But we don't always include each other. All of us can stereotype. There's a story in the book about my lab partner and I stereotyping each other, and she thought I was too cute to do chemistry, and I thought she looked like Miss California, and I didn't think that was really a safe bet. I needed a smart lab partner. She's a MacArthur Fellow, a really famous professor, Laura Kiesling, at MIT in biochem, and I had a pretty cool job. So were we wrong? Oh, we were so wrong, right? But it's so easy to do, especially when you're emotionally attached to the problem. And so, and I think another way to look at it is that when you know that the entire mission, maybe the entire space program, depends on it, I think what we have a tendency to do is to sort of shrink down and know that, boy, we have to make the best possible decision that we can about what the next course is, about who on the team to be listening to, excuse me, and about who to pick for the team. And when you wake up in the morning and you have to think you did the right thing, chances are you've just finished picking somebody that looks and feels a lot like you. And it is not because you're a bad person. It's because you are all about the solution and doing the best you can. And so we have to redefine best to not be what's comfortable. To that best is going to mean that you're going to say some things that are unpopular. You're going to have to get people to listen to somebody that they don't feel like listening to, right? Because they're abrasive or hard to hear or don't bring out their idea very well, but everybody knows they actually have the solution. So it's not easy.
Oh, for sure.
Do you want a more
Um,
succinct way? I sort of blabber about that. I haven't gotten all crisp
no, I
about
like
that
that. I
example.
think that I don't think you blabbered at all. When you think about the teams that you worked on
Hmm.
at NASA, I mean, team to me, there's never been a more important team than the team that's going to send you to space. Your lives literally hang in the balance of your teammates, and you need to trust them completely. How do you get to a point where you feel like you are so confident in your team that you'll strap yourself to a rocket?
Part of that is about being on the same team. I mean, that everybody's on board with the fact that we're going to have honest conversations. I mean, I tell people ask, well, how can you feel okay being on a launch pad? And I said, I assume that everyone has done their best. And I can make that assumption because I have gone to, the place where they actually manufacture parts of the engine or put together some of the electronics. And I've gone around and asked people how they are. And I ask them in a way that they know it's okay to tell me, right? And they're not going to get in trouble. And also across the NASA culture, there is this, I mean, it is so much more important to admit that you made a mistake. You don't remember if you did this step, or that you actually are pretty sure you did make this mistake. And it can be a really public thing, but it's so important to admit that. And we also make it very possible to admit things unintentionally. And there can even be, I mean, we have a flight safety program where we fly in airplanes. They're like small, tiny jets that for a chemist in the Air Force is very, very fun to get to do. And if you make a mistake and realize that in the middle of doing your checklist, somebody asked you something and you were just about to check that each of your buckles on your harness were buckled, so your parachute's attached to you. And if you realize, I didn't check that. I checked one of them and not the other because I got interrupted. Even if you realize that they actually were buckled, the fact that you didn't do the check is something to share with the office. Like, I got interrupted. And sometimes we find out people go, I get interrupted at that part of the checklist too. And maybe we need to redesign the checklist. And we've added things like, when we're flying, often it's what we call sterile cockpit between up to 10,000 feet and coming in for a landing, because this is the really times you're busy, the times that you're these are the times that you're really busy in the flight. And that's from lessons learned of, when you're flying across the country and there's no other traffic. And I mean, then you can ask how people's kids are. But when you're coming in for a landing, that's when you have to really be focused. And we've made rules like that. So almost every rule has somebody's name behind it, right? Sometimes you don't want to be that rule. And at the same time, we've created a culture where people really do speak up about what they've done that they realize could have been done better. And that's how I feel fine getting on top of that rocket, because I do know that people have done their best. It's never going to be safe to go to space. It's not a safe sport. It's not a sport. But it can only depend that people have done their best and spoken up about things they feel strongly about, which in many ways was what I did by bringing cake, frosting, and every tool in my silverware drawer to the meeting so people could damage their cake and then frost it and have a great time getting to know each other.
I love that. Um, let's just talk a little bit about risk. You sort of mentioned it just now, the risks associated with a job like this. Clearly, as an astronaut, you are not a risk averse person. How, once you've done things like spacewalks and travel to space, how does that change your risk profile in just your daily life and how you think about how you live?
Well, I would actually disagree with the very first part of your statement, and that assuming that because I go to space, I'm I have a higher, well, I probably do have a higher risk tolerance, but I will tell you that me and everybody that I work with, we just think in this sort of litany of, okay, what if this happens? What if this happens? And it, leads to great grief for my husband, who's like, why do we need why do we need our snow pants or a sleeping bag and a shovel when we're only going to drive to upstate New York? And I'm like, because it's like October and there's been big snows when but we are actually people that um, sorry, cat crossing,
No,
right?
it's
Yeah.
okay.
Um, that we really do think, what's next? What's the next thing that can happen? And so even though we do things that are hard and involve in the final consequences can be quite large and certainly including death, um, we're people that are always looking for, how could I do this more safely? Especially if it's not something we've really thought about before.
So to you, it's more about thinking through all of the different possibilities and being prepared as
Hmm.
opposed to thinking about it as a risky endeavor.
Exactly. I'll give you an example. I do fly planes and I'm a pilot, but I haven't got the experience of somebody who flew fighter jets for years, right? And one of those people, I was driving, it happened to be a guy, driving with him, and we're on the highway, and we ended up in a situation. It's not some big situation, but we're in the middle lane, and there's cars on either side. And he slowed down and gotten back on one of these other cars. He said, I never feel comfortable being in the middle when there are two people exactly on either side of me, because I have no way out. And maybe I would have sped up to get ahead. Maybe I'll slow down. But I see that situation. There are not enough options for me, and I change it.
That's so interesting. So it's also about situational awareness, is what you're saying here.
Yes, it is. Well, it's definitely about situational awareness. And I think that's an interesting subject, because it's like, that's when we talk about diversity of teams, we need people that notice the situation. And the situation has a lot of different facets to it. And for example, I mean, not, it's a sort of a funny example, but my husband and I commute, and I would come home after not being here for a few weeks, and he'd go, well, it's been 3 days, sweetie, and you didn't notice. I'm like, is it another rug? They're all red. He likes Oriental carpets, right? But that kind of visual is just not something that I notice. But when I'm in the middle of doing something and I hear a noise that doesn't belong there, I'm like, and so, we need people that notice things in all different ways. And actually, something that I've been had some interesting experience with lately is a group called Astro Access. It's a group called Astro Access, and it's a group of people with disabilities that are looking at, instead of just answering the question, can people who have disabilities go to space? Just looking at, well, what are the challenges and can they be overcome? And how could we test? How could we explore? And finding out how people with different disabilities see and experience the world has been really fascinating. And it, I, it, I think often there's things that we do for disabilities that we suddenly realize all of us are benefiting from. Something simple like curb cuts, when the curb slopes down. As somebody who's always wheeling a suitcase, or, for a couple of years there, a stroller, I want those places where I can wheel whatever I'm, carrying around. And in the case of having a fire up on the space station, we have on the wall markings of, this is where the fire extinguisher is, with an arrow going up. Well, in a smoky module, you're probably not going to be able to read or even go find that label, right? We are actually supposed to know where they all are. But if you can find it, if it was in Braille, if it had ridges where the arrow was, so you could know what that meant in terms of direction, that just be plain old better, right? And so often, by seeing somebody else's point of view, we end up designing things um, in a better way. And in fact, flying on that zero gravity airplane where we're testing, this is where you actually, it's also affectionately known as the vomit comet, okay? Because it basically flies like a porpoise. It flies up steeply and then it noses over and flies down steeply. And my husband is bringing me blueberries.
Nice.
Cool. Um, so it flies up steeply and then it flies down. And when it's flying down as fast as if you were like falling without your parachute. So you're falling inside the airplane and it gives you about 30 seconds of weightlessness. But then when you're going to start flying up again, wherever the floor is, that is where you are going to be and they'll say, 10, 10, 10 away or something. I forget what they say, but you got like 10 seconds to make sure you get to the floor before you get to the floor. And for the people who are hearing impaired, that wasn't working, right? And they said, would you mind if could we set up lights so the lights blink red? And they've started actually changing the way they do operations on that plane because having an extra set of signals was really useful.
And useful for everyone, it sounds like.
Exactly. Yep.
No, I love that. You
Am
talk a lot
I
in the...
talking too long to...
No, not at all. This is great. This
Okay.
is great.
Okay.
Cady, you talk a lot in the book about feelings of insecurity, and about feeling inadequate from time to time, and frankly, times that people underestimated you and maybe caused some of those feelings to emerge. How did you overcome that, and do you have advice for other folks who maybe find themselves in similar situations?
Well, I like to tell people that I feel that way because I just want them to know that when they want to do the thing of their dreams, they might think only special people get to do that who don't have these, human frailties, and in particular that one, right? And so I just, feel like if I share that it might make a difference for them. It's probably also my way of talking it out. But when I feel underestimated, it actually two things happen. So when somebody just kind of looks at you like, really? You're here for that? And part of me, I've showed up to do something hard and important. And, part of me is like, I wonder if I can really do this. When they're like, hey, we only expected the best people to show up and you came too. And I mean, they don't really say that. Emily, I'm trying to think of a better example. Well, I'll just start it a different way. And so when somebody looks at me as if they don't really understand why I should be here and what I bring, and even I'll say like in public speaking, where even though I'm actually, I think, a pretty good public speaker, I still get nervous and I'm always kind of thinking and rearranging in my head and reacting to what I see in the room. And so when somebody, there was an alumni kind of thing and a very, very sort of um, well-known person was also speaking. And they, were getting managed and they were, okay, you're going to do this and you're going to do this. And they were like kind of over explaining the script and things like that. And I was like, yeah, I've done some speaking. I think that this will be fine with me. And if you want to go off script, that part will be fine. Thing I think we need to focus on. But you could just tell that they, just since they spoke so much, it never occurred to them that I might too. And then when we actually basically performed at this benefit, of both being the co-host of this benefit, and I was a good, like maybe a really good co-host as well. They were like, wow, she could speak. And certainly, I end up evaluating like, boy, when somebody underestimates me, I just think, I am a little nervous about being good enough for that. But it also just triggers this, like, part of me knows I'm going to be okay at that. And it just makes me mad. Like the guys in my high school who didn't think I could go to a school like MIT. And I'm like, wow. And so, applying and just quietly, and actually, I don't think anybody else got in, just saying. But anyways, it makes me mad. And that anger actually gives me sort of a way to remind myself that I can do that.
So it sort of gives you focus.
It gives me focus. It gives me determination. Because it's almost like you're right at this little precipice, this little cliff where somebody's saying, I don't think you can do that. And you can either look down and go, yeah, I'm kind of worried about it too. Or you could go, listen, part of you knows you can do this. And what are you going to do? Listen to that. I mean, are you going to go or not? You're not going to stay here at the little cliff, are you? Let's go.
I love that. I'm gonna
That's
I'm gonna
kind of messy. Sorry.
no, it was great. It was great. I'm gonna switch gears on you just a hair.
Okay.
If you've got some time.
I do.
Okay.
And I'm actually just let me plug in. I usually am like together. It's sort of at the end of my little thing. Anyways, go ahead. And that I
Yeah.
wouldn't plug in the computer, and I look and I'm like, oh, 17%.
Yeah, that's not
Excuse
good.
me,
We
not
don't
the
want to
number
lose
I
you.
want to see. Yep.
Well, let's talk about the I believe you called them countless arrangements you had to make balancing being a mother with your job at NASA. Um, there was a story about pumping in the janitor's closet and running there in the couple of minutes that you had. Did you ever feel like having to do things like that held you back? And do you have advice for other mothers who find themselves in really challenging situations where they have to balance that with jobs that take them thousands of miles away for extended periods?
I heard most of your question. There's the question, do you have any advice for mothers in these situations?
Yes, and maybe any experiences that you had while at NASA that that sort of helped you figure out how to find that balance for yourself.
I think that um, we haven't reached a point in our evolution where I can afford to be unprepared with respect to childcare or my ability to accomplish my family mission, but also not threaten my work mission, especially in a public way. And I mentioned in the books that you know daycare. I mean, I don't know in the movies. I wish it was like in the movies, but it just isn't. Sorry. That that just isn't like it is in the movies. And at least in our case, we just weren't a family that could afford to, like, since we did commute, we couldn't really afford to have somebody who lived with me in Houston, got on a plane with a ticket that I bought them and came to Massachusetts. And, it just wasn't going to happen that way. So we had lots of different kinds of daycare that seemed to work out. And I usually, there are times that you have like 12 different backups and you're calling number 13. I don't call you very much, but I really need your help. There is like nobody to pick up Jamie. And I always would have those plans and actually that network that was ready to stretch for me, um, because I felt like I needed it. And I didn't, and I would say that some of the guys, I would, myself and Julie Payette from Canada were in charge of Capcomming for the station and for the shuttle. And one of the guys would write, um, he would write on the schedule, single dad this week, no Capcomming. And of course, Julie and I have to be responsible for our own domestic situations, and we choose to commute, both of us, and be geographically single. And so we have to make sure we've made arrangements. But I would never dream of saying I'm a single parent, and yet, you know, it's not really our job to be lecturing people either. Well, I don't really want to go there, so to speak, in our discussion.
That's
Um,
okay, Katie. But I'm interested in what you just said, which was this idea that you also didn't always feel like you could say out loud some of the challenges that you were experiencing as a parent because it could potentially blow back on you career wise. Is that accurate?
I think it has to be clear that you're managing it. And and I don't want to create the impression, I think, from back in the 60s where, different people in their marriages and in their families would have difficulties. And NASA and the astronaut office, very, very family oriented places where they really do embrace. And so many of the astronaut spouses were so helpful to me, lending me their daycare mechanism, getting some daycare to accept me at the last minute. I mean, all those kinds of things. So I didn't feel the need to act as if everything was easy, but I did feel the need to have it seem that all of it was wrapped up, that I was someone they could depend on. And as a commuting person, that actually cost us quite a lot of flexibility and even money. If I arrive in Massachusetts on Friday night and the freak snowstorm is supposed to arrive by Sunday, I'm going to get on a plane Saturday morning. And it's just the way we decided we we're going to live. And part of that was that I could have maybe lined up somebody else to take my place in whatever I was supposed to be at on Monday. But you can only do that not very many times. And actually, you have to think about, is that right good for the mission? You're affecting the whole schedule of things. So I guess what I'm trying to emphasize is that, first of all, even in a general public sort of way, people don't. Sorry. In a general public kind of way, it's not really fair to either the women or the men. But very few people ask the men how they feel about leaving their family back on Earth when they go to space. And sometimes they're not asking nicely, right? And in fact, I did have the experience where literally someone shared with me that their distinct impression was that I wasn't assigned to the space station because I commuted and lived apart from my family, and I might miss them too much when I was in space or training, which is logically just ludicrous, right? So, like, if that can happen, you know, so I do just feel like there could be a different standard, and I think the way to do that is to very publicly be yourself with a family, be yourself with a family coping. And in fact, I actually, in my talks, almost always include my family. And you might notice that in some of the documentaries and things like that that are out, one of the sort of functions I could perform, as a guest on those documentaries is helping other women understand that they can have what is actually a very normal life. Having a family and juggling, you don't have to be going to space to have it be hard. It could be hard every day. And that, it can be done even in our world.
I love that. What an amazing message. Cady, I want to ask you a couple of questions about some of the more newsier things going on in the world right now, and then I'll let you
Sure.
go. Obviously we've got some astronauts currently on the space station who have been up there a little bit longer than they had planned. You've been there before. What do you think this situation is like? I know you're not plugged into exactly what's happening right now, but talk a little bit about what that's like right now, up on the space station, and maybe give us a sense of what people must be feeling.
I'm can't really speak exactly for that, but I know that people, and then there's people that I'm still, in great touch with. And like there's Butch Wilmore, who I don't know quite as well as Sunny Williams. And all I'll say is Google Sunny Williams Space Station Tour. Okay. And the woman that you see showing you around the space station as if she is your next door neighbor, and as if she's your next door neighbor, you will realize that she is up there getting a ton of work done. She's got this opportunity to stay, get stuff done. Her family knows that when it's the right time, she'll be back. And in the meantime, she and Butch, by adding two people to that crew, it is actually it's changing what we can accomplish on the space station, because there is always a to-do list that is miles long, and it needs to have people, enough people to do some of these things. And we so often crew time. I'll say that crew time, the amount of time that the astronauts can spend actually fixing something, doing something. Some experiment will be sidelined for weeks or months because its turn hasn't come up. And so I am so excited that they're still up there. But importantly, the reason that they're up there is like NASA at its best. Okay. And that is that I mean, before Sonny and Butch got in that rocket and took off, everybody calculated how long can they stay there? Let's say the worst happens. We have like a lot of things to fix or something bad. What if they can't come home with that spacecraft? What are we going to do? What are we going to do if they have to wait a long time? How long can they be up there? Will they want to run out of water, food, power, chocolate, right? And and so they've already done those calculations. And but let's talk about the physical reason that they are staying up there, and that is that their their spaceship has got two parts. One is the part they're going to sit in to come home, but the other one is the engine, that helped get them up there. Not the big one, but we're already done with that. But it's still got these ways of propulsion that we need for a little bit just to push off from the space station and get started on its way back to Earth. And then they are going to push that off, and it's going to burn up in the atmosphere, never to be seen again. And the reason they're staying on the space station is that the leaks that they're seeing, these small leaks, are actually on that part that we're going to throw away. And so they want to understand how it's leaking, why it's leaking. And so, like, if the space station moves this way, what does it do? They've got a lot of data to collect, and they don't have to be in a hurry because they've already planned. There's enough room up there, and Sonny and Butch can be helping do a whole bunch of stuff and get our backlog of work under control on the space station. And so it is NASA at NASA's best, doing the best, doing using great options that they themselves have created. And I guarantee you that Butch and Sonny are happier than you can insert any expression you like there. But those smiles are genuine, okay?
Extra time in space, right?
Abs- Ugh, everybody's jealous. Like, oh, really? And actually, it's kind of like fair too, in that Sonny gets. I mean, Sonny gets to go for longer. And I mean, she's somebody who has so much experience on the space station. And I can't, for some reason, it takes a long time to get good at stuff up there. But once you are, like, when you get back to space, you sort of click into this different mode of like, I'm in that land where everything floats around and you know just what to do. Whereas when you're first up there, you're like a puppy, kind of like, whoa, this is so cool. And it's not that you're like meant to, you're just laughing or being trivial. It's more that, having everything float around, it just takes a while. Your brain is doing a lot of processing, like, what is going on? All these things are happening. So Sunny and Butch are both experienced space folks, and they're getting a lot done out there because they're already trained.
Well, thanks for sharing that. The other quick question I had before I let you go is just about the privatization of space travel and
Hmm.
the sort of promises that a lot of these private space companies are making about space tourism and the future of that. As you look at what's being developed and some of the goals that some of these private space companies have in mind for just the regular Joe to go up and go into space. How realistic do you feel like that is? And is that something that, you or anybody in your family would ever want to do?
I think many people in my family would want to do, starting with husband guy. Okay. And actually, he's a guy his art, he's a glass artist, so it depends on gravity, right? He's fighting gravity all the time. He's like, what could be better? I do think it's a reality, though, that those things, I mean, they're already happening in the sense that we see Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin bringing people up in a rocket and having that couple of minutes of weightlessness, like probably between 3 and 5, before they then cruise back down and land, on Earth. And they're getting that view of the Earth. They're feeling what it's like to be weightless, and they're seeing the curve of the Earth and realizing that, I mean, it's a special place that we all live here, and I think that view really changes you. And so it'll be next. I mean, we know how to live at NASA and our partners, international partners around the world. We know how to live on a space station. We've learned a lot, and can we bring people up there so they can be themselves and discover new things and add dimensions to their experiences and bring that back down to Earth? I mean, every one of us that is gone, I think, brings perspectives back to Earth that are useful and unique. And what I especially like about these new partnerships and actually these big dreams is that they include people. And what, think about this, like what would it have meant? We're now 55, coming up on the 55th anniversary of the moon landing. What would yours and my life be like, and what would our horizons be like if a woman had walked on the moon? I mean, we would have been born and grown up thinking a totally different sort of horizon was not just possible but probable. Like if I mean, we it was hard what we did, in terms of men or women, but you grew up thinking that all these things were possible because you'd seen somebody that looked and felt like you do that, right? And this commercial space flight um, gives us that possibility. We're seeing people of different generations, we're seeing families, we're seeing people of color, and we're seeing people with disabilities. And what that means to people on the ground, who haven't gone yet, they're like, wow, if that thing I always thought was so impossible, if they can do that and I'm kind of like them, that means I could do anything. And that's how we save the world, I think, is empowering that many people.
Well, what an amazing way to end today's conversation. Cady, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. This is a fantastic conversation, and just good luck with the book launch. I know you got a lot ahead of you, so just really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And I was glad when we met, and loved hearing about, sort of how you went from media to basically just, being part of the media to being the media, and with a special point of view and a special voice. And I really enjoyed talking
Well,
today.
thanks, Cady.